Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, today's focus is on suppliers, partners, and collaborators. So without much further ado, let's get going. Because as you've seen in this chart, we're going to continue to define the what of your organization. And we find this particular section down in the bottom left side of the organizational profile within organizational relationships. It's called section P1B3, suppliers, partners, and collaborators. So the purpose of this is for you to capture who your suppliers, your partners, and collaborators are, and share that with the organization. Now, first of all, in order to capture those, you need to define them. And you need to identify your definition of a supplier, your definition of a partner, and so on for collaborators. And then how you differentiate a supplier from a partner, etc. Now, we'll have some examples a little bit later to go into a little bit more detail on that. The next thing after you've identified them is you need to identify what role they play in producing and delivering your key products and services to your customers, and how they help you enhance your own competitiveness, as well as how they help you identify and implement innovation. And then finally, according to the criteria, what we're looking for here is to capture your key supply network requirements, which kind of leads us to a definition of supply network. So let's look at how the supplier concept has developed over time. Now, we can look at a SIPOC: suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. The suppliers provide resources and materials, inputs, into your process, which you synthesize into outputs that provide value to your customer. Now, this is a classic supply chain concept. A feeds B, who feeds C. Very linear. But systems are much more complicated these days. And we don't think of it as a supply chain, but more of a supply network. Supply network indicates much more interaction between your organization and your suppliers, your partners, and your collaborators, as well as between you and your customers. It's more of a web or a network. And if you have the concept in mind, it helps you address how these suppliers and partners are engaged in helping you improve your competitiveness and how they're involved in helping you apply innovation opportunities. For example, are they engaged in your strategic planning? Do you share forecasts with them? Is there any kind of sharing of technological advancements between yourselves and your suppliers? Now, a couple of weeks ago, John Cuban shared about core competencies and how it's best for you to offload those things that are not your core competencies onto your partners. For example, if you're a small organization and payroll is just not your thing, therefore partner with ADP. If you're a manufacturer and building circuit boards isn't a core competency, then use a contract manufacturer and focus your efforts on what you are good at. And having that knowledge may really help you determine who your partners really are. And when it comes to collaborators, they could be professional organizations, community engagement situations. It really depends on your own particular situation. Well, let's go through what the criteria is really asking for. And, you know, it's interesting, if we look at the criteria categories, suppliers, partners, and collaborators touch most of them. You know, and how does your leadership system communicate with your suppliers? And how do you, as leaders, share your mission, values, and vision with your supply base? How are they involved in your strategic planning? What kind of relevant knowledge do you share with them? And in category 6, how do you manage your supply network? And then finally, in results, what results do you have to show that this is being effective? Now, the last item that we have to capture in order to meet the requirements are, what are your key supply network requirements? Now, that's often quality, schedule, and cost. but there may be things that are unique, and you need to capture those within the organizational profile. So let's look at how one would go about documenting these kinds of things in an organizational profile. What does it kind of look like? Now, remember, you've got a 5-page limit, 2,500 words and 12 figures that you can put into a GSA org profile, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. Now, note, all these examples are Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award case studies. And this first is manufacturing organization. You identify your key, and this is really important, key suppliers. In my last life, I had a small manufacturing organization. I had 102 suppliers on my approved suppliers list. I'm not going to list all 102. Who are your key suppliers? And then separately, who are your key partners? Now, in manufacturing, this example, they identify community colleges and universities as partners because they're helping to provide a qualified workforce. Next, across the top, you see in this example, their role in the work system, their role in helping you with innovation, the key requirements for each of them, and finally, how they're communicated with and managed. Here's another example for a banking organization. They identify their suppliers or partners, their role in communication, and finally, their supply chain requirements. You can see how they define their partners differently than the previous example. Excuse me. So let's look at some examples. Now that we've looked at some examples how to show it, let's look at how it actually reads. And here's an example that I'd like you to look at for education. In their example, they're describing their 3-tier system and how each plays a key role in their work systems, although they don't really tell us anything about how that works. That they expect to have the same values and focus on common mission and vision, okay? And then they also look at how they are included in a communication plan, and they're invited to appropriate meetings, although, again, they don't really tell us what appropriate is. You can really get a lot more information across in a well-developed table. Well, excuse my cough, but in summary, what you do is you define suppliers, partners, and collaborators. You describe who the key suppliers, partners, and collaborators are for your organization. You identify their role in enhancing your competitiveness and your innovation opportunities, and you define the key supply network requirements. Well, that's my story. I'd be happy to answer and entertain any kind of questions that you may have. Laura, I hand off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. That was very, very insightful. So it's funny because I think we kind of, on your summary notes, I duplicated your summary note. My very first bullet is define the criteria that differentiate a key supplier, partner, and collaborator, and the roles they play in alignment with your supply needs, network requirements, and any innovation. So I think that was kind of a summary on your last summary slide. Create yeah, we're in alignment. Create a SIPOC model to ensure requirements are captured completely, and then leverage this model from a linear supply chain to evolve into more of a supply network model over time. And I really like that example you provided and the guidance in regard to the benefits you get from a network model over a linear SIPOC. Continue to assess the supply chain, the supply network for competitiveness, and to identify methods for innovative discovery and opportunities. And then, of course, you know, we want to leverage our suppliers, our partners, and our collaborators to become more competitive and strategically positioned by offloading work that is not directly aligned to our core competencies, right? Because as you referenced, core competencies are those things that we don't want to give up, right? Those are the things that set us apart from our competitors. So we never really want to give those to our suppliers and collaborators in totality. Okay, identify key network supplier requirements and expectations and assess how you are engaging your key suppliers, partners, and collaborators in fulfilling these expectations. That's very critical. And then I really liked your closing comment before your summary slide about leveraging the tables and the diagrams. Sometimes that paragraph, with or without the bolding on the text, the context just gets lost. So by leveraging tables and diagrams, it's easier to analyze a situation in a tabular format than it would be in a written paragraph. So leveraging those tables and diagrams to convey important information and to assess how well you are doing against these expectations. Sometimes alone, just leveraging a table helps you see things more clearly and innovate more effectively. All right, great presentation. Really enjoyed that. So a question for you. I've got one teed up here.
Okay.
So it looks like, what is a good approach for ensuring that full discovery of current partners, suppliers, and collaborators occurs?
Okay, so again, as we mentioned, you really got to start with your definition of who a supplier is. And that's kind of easy, because all you have to do is you march down to procurement and you say, tell me everybody we buy stuff from. So that helps you get a feel for your suppliers. The partners and collaborators may be a little bit more challenging, because you may be looking at what services they may be providing you, and that's something that you may work more as a team rather than just going to a list of your supply base. But having an approved suppliers list is a good place to start to kind of get full discovery of who your suppliers and partners may be.
Got it. Thank you. How do I know when to look for a new supplier, partner, or collaborator?
Now that's a good question. It's, I guess the answer is when the existing supplier, partner, or collaborator is not meeting your needs. So it's kind of like if you know that they're not able to provide you the quality level or the delivery capacity, then it may be time for you to look for someone else. And a great way to do that is to start with a supplier questionnaire to understand, okay, well, what kind of, here's what kind of quality system does your organization have? Do a Dun and Bradstreet kind of financial background and make sure that they are a viable organization, because nothing worse than pulling on a supplier and then having them go belly up. That's not helping your business. And then make sure that they have both the technical capability and capacity that's going to meet your needs, because it's great if they're really good at doing what you need, but if they don't have the capacity to be able to meet your needs, then that too becomes a challenge. So
Right.
really synchronizing between you and that potential supplier.
Got it. So on the flip side of that, how do you know when to exit a relationship? I guess it's kind of similar, right? If they're not meeting your needs, but then.
Yeah. Well, I would hope that the engineer in me is saying this, that you base that decision on data and not emotion. So,
Yeah.
Having a really effective supplier quality program where you're monitoring your key suppliers' quality levels, you're monitoring their delivery, and of course the bean counter is going to make sure that you're monitoring costs. Kind of having a supplier scorecard should be a great tool for being able to track when you have an issue with a supplier. Having a strong root cause corrective action system, so when you identify that you apply down to your supply base. Hey, these last 3 lots of materials that you sent in, we've had issues with. What's the root? You determine what's that root cause, and what are you going to do differently in order to meet our needs? But really base it on data, on actual performance.
And this applies both to just not manufacturing only, right? It applies to the service industry as well as products. It's very portable. It's broad, right?
Right. Having SLAs, service level agreements. What are your service level expectations for that partner, and making sure that they're keeping up on that? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. All right. I think we have, can we squeeze one more question in? I'll go quick. How can I leverage this information to drive innovation or operational change?
Okay. So innovation and operational change. I would, it really builds into your whole strategy as an organization, is how you tying in your partners and suppliers and collaborators into how you understand your current needs and your future needs. And being able to understand what the supplier or partner's current capabilities are, as well as their future capabilities, to make sure that you guys are tied together and are going to be successful not only in the short term, but in the long term.
Right. Great job. Well, thank you very much, Bob. This has been extremely insightful. So I just want to remind everybody as we wrap up, don't forget to check out the sterlingcouncil.org or floridasterling.com for additional content from today's session, including my summary notes. And then I really want to highlight a special event that we have coming up at the end of May. Our Sterling Council Conference this year is actually scheduled from May 31st to June 3rd. It is going to be at the Gaylord Palms, Orlando, which is different from previous years. In the previous years, it's been at the JW Marriott in Orlando. It's a beautiful Gaylord Palms, beautiful facility. We will be hosting a special event celebration for our 30th year anniversary of Sterling. We'd like to take the opportunity to invite you all to the conference and make sure you're aware that the conference is scheduled again, May 31st to June 3rd. And then I also do want to ask that if anybody has any suggestions that they would like to recommend for a 30 to 60-minute leadership briefing presentation that we can make at the conference, perhaps you have a topic in mind, I would be more than willing to tee it up with our group of presenters and see what we can present to you during the conference. So if anything pops into your mind, or if you do happen to have any suggestions that you would like to share with us, feel free to send them via email to info@thesterlingcouncil.org. So email any suggestions you might have in regard to presentations that we can make at the Gaylord Palms, Orlando during our May 31st to June 3rd 30-year celebration.
Yeah.
Send them to info@thesterlingcouncil.org. And boy, just saying that makes me feel old, but great. I'm sure it'll be a great time. And then don't forget to join us next week, April 12th, 12:15. We will have a new session called Describing Your Competitive Position and Understanding Competitive Changes. It will be featuring our very own Sterling Master Examiner, Dr. Samson Goldstein, who is also professor in the Industrial and Systems Engineering and Engineering Manufacturing Department at the University of Alabama. Until then, I hope you all have a very happy week ahead.